Section 3. A Philosophy for the Soul. Section 3. A Philosophy for the Soul. Contents. 1. From History to Philosophy. 2. Herodotus and the Stories That Shaped Greece. 3. Thucydides and the Dark Mirror of War. 4. Pericles and the Ethics of Leadership. 5. The Transition to Philosophy, Socrates and the Soul. 6. Virtue as Harmony, Plato's Moral Psychology. 7. From Politics to the Soul, Why Philosophy Matters. What you will learn in this section. Welcome to Section 3, A Philosophy for the Soul. In this section, we move from myth and poetry to reason and reflection. Here, we enter the world of early political philosophy, where questions of power, virtue, and justice were no longer just sung, but debated. You will explore how Herodotus captured the moral lessons of history through vivid stories and cautionary tales, how Thucydides revealed the inner decay of politics through war, ambition, and the fall of reason, why Pericles' funeral oration still speaks to the heart of justice, duty, and civic virtue, how these thinkers laid the foundation for the ethical vision of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and most importantly, how philosophy became not just a way to think, but a way to live. This is the turning point in our journey, where we stop asking what happened and begin asking what is right. Key figures: Herodotus, the moral historian; Thucydides, the tragedy of power; Pericles, the voice of civic virtue; Socrates, the birth of moral philosophy; Plato and Aristotle, truth, virtue, and the soul. By the end of this section, you'll see how Greek thinkers began to shift the focus from the glory of heroes to the order of the soul, from fate and myth to ethics and reason, from spectacle to self-examination. Let's begin our exploration of the soul's most enduring guide, philosophy. Instructor Introduction. Your guide for this section is Professor Soichi Nakamura, a best-selling author, a Columbia-educated philosopher, and a former top-ranked tennis champion in Japan. He combines the discipline of sport, the rigor of classical education, and the heart of a teacher to explore one timeless question: what does it mean to live well, not just successfully, but wisely and justly? Through the lens of Greco-Roman philosophy and the liberal arts tradition, he invites us to examine the soul, not as a theory, but as a reality that shapes every choice we make. This is not just a lesson in history. It is a return to something deeper, the pursuit of virtue, meaning, and moral clarity in a world that often forgets all three.
Thank you for joining me. This section is the heart of our course. We have explored myths, poems, and histories, but now we turn inward, to the soul. For the Greeks, philosophy was not an academic subject. It was a way of life, a pursuit of truth, virtue, and harmony within. Socrates questioned everything, not to destroy, but to rebuild the soul. Plato wrote dialogues, not to give answers, but to shape character. And Aristotle taught ethics, not to lecture, but to train us in moral excellence. In this section, we ask, what does it mean to live wisely? What kind of soul leads to a just society? And how do we cultivate inner freedom when the world around us feels so lost? This is not a political question. It is a human question, one that concerns you, me, and everyone we care about. So let us begin this journey into the soul, with courage, with honesty, and with hope. In our last section, we journeyed through Homer's world, a world of heroes, gods, and epic struggles. But now, something shifts. History no longer belongs to kings and warriors alone. It becomes the story of ordinary people, of choices, of values, of the soul. We move from myth to reflection, from legend to reason. This is the beginning of philosophy, not as theory, but as a guide for living well. From Herodotus, who told us the stories of nations, to Thucydides, who revealed the struggles of power, fear and pride, we now step into a deeper question. Not just what happened, but why it mattered. Not just who won, but who was just. And above all, how can a human being, with all our limits and longings, live with dignity, clarity and peace? This is the soul's question, and this is where philosophy begins. 2. Herodotus and the stories that shaped Greece. Before there were philosophers, there were storytellers, and among them, Herodotus stands as the first great historian of the West. But Herodotus was more than a chronicler of battles. He was a moral thinker, deeply concerned with the causes and consequences of human action. In his masterpiece, The Histories, he tells us not just what happened, but why it mattered. From the tragic fall of Croesus, to the courage of the Spartans at Thermopylae, to the miraculous victories at Marathon, Salamis and Plataea, Herodotus wove together the events of the Persian Wars into a larger reflection on justice, pride, hubris and divine fate. Great empires fall because they forget justice. Herodotus, Histories 1:5. He recounts how Solon, the wise Athenian lawgiver, warned King Croesus of Lydia not to judge happiness by wealth or power. Count no man happy until the end is known. Solon to Croesus, Histories 1:32. Moments later, Croesus loses everything, proving Solon right. This was more than a tale. It was a lesson in humility, in fortune's fragility, and in the moral fabric of history. Herodotus believed that history had a moral structure. Nations that respected justice thrived. Those who became arrogant or cruel, even if powerful, invited ruin. When the Greek city-states put aside their rivalries and united in defense of freedom, they achieved the impossible. They defeated the greatest empire of their time, Persia. Freedom is a possession of such great value that even those who are not free will fight for it. Herodotus, paraphrased. Through his vivid storytelling, Herodotus shaped the moral imagination of the Greeks. His work taught that justice is not just a legal system. It is the soul of a civilization. Without it, even mighty kingdoms collapse. With it, even small and divided cities can prevail. 3. Thucydides and the dark mirror of war. If Herodotus shows us the light of unity and justice, Thucydides shows us the darkness that follows when these are lost. In his history of the Peloponnesian War, he recounts the brutal conflict between Athens and Sparta, not as a story of heroes, but as a moral and political collapse. War is a violent teacher. Thucydides 3:8-2. Where Herodotus was a storyteller, Thucydides was a realist. He rejected myths. He analyzed causes, motives and human nature in cold, exacting terms. The war began as a rivalry between great powers, but quickly descended into a tragedy of arrogance, betrayal and short-sighted leadership. After the death of Pericles, who had led Athens with vision and restraint, the city fell into the hands of populists like Cleon and reckless figures like Alcibiades. Their speeches swayed the masses, not with wisdom, but with anger and fear. The strong do what they can, the weak suffer what they must. Thucydides 589, Melian Dialogue. This chilling statement, spoken by Athenian envoys to the neutral Melians, exposes how justice was reduced to power, and how moral decay led Athens to cruelty. As the war dragged on, Athens turned on its own allies, slaughtered innocent cities, and executed Socrates' friends, thinkers, generals, and dissenters. Reason gave way to rage, democracy collapsed into demagoguery. The once great city, which had stood for freedom, became a warning to the world. Thucydides teaches us that when virtue and reason fail, no constitution or government can save a society. It was the rise of irrational behaviour, masked as patriotism, that destroyed Athens. Interpretation of Thucydides' account. His history is not just about war, it is a mirror, showing us what we become when we abandon self-control, justice and truth. Four, Pericles and the ethics of leadership. While Thucydides chronicled Athens' decline, he also preserved one of its greatest moments of moral clarity, the funeral oration of Pericles, a tribute not only to the dead but to the values of the living. In the midst of war and mourning, Pericles did not glorify conquest. Instead, he honoured the Athenian spirit, a society where courage was tempered by wisdom and freedom by responsibility. We cultivate refinement without extravagance and knowledge without weakness. Pericles' funeral oration. He described a city where citizens felt bound by an unwritten code, not enforced by fear, but guided by shame and conscience. There is justice here, not only written in law, but in the hearts of our people. Paraphrased from Thucydides 2:37. This is what Aristotle would later call moral beauty, justice as something more than rules, a habit of the soul. Pericles laid out a vision of three forms of justice, echoed centuries later in Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. Corrective justice, laws to right wrongs and restore balance. When rights are violated, we defend the weak and correct the wrong. Distributive justice, rewards based on merit and ability. Positions of honour are not given by birth, but by talent and virtue. General justice, the spirit of fairness, dignity and mutual respect. Even without laws, shame teaches us what is right. Pericles was not just a politician, he was a philosopher leader, one who inspired through example. He reminded Athens that democracy was not just a system, but a moral commitment. Our constitution is called a democracy because power is in the hands not of a few, but of the many. Thucydides 2:37. But this power, he warned, must be guided by virtue, or it would destroy itself from within. Through Pericles we glimpse a fleeting harmony, freedom with discipline, leadership with integrity, power with wisdom, a vision still needed in our own time. 5. The transition to philosophy. Socrates and the soul. Pericles gave Athens a moral vision of civic life, but after his death, that vision began to crumble. Corruption spread, populace rose, justice became a tool of power, not a virtue of the soul. It was in this moment of decline that a strange man began asking dangerous questions. Socrates. He was not a general or a politician. He wore no fine robes, gave no grand speeches. Instead, he wandered the streets of Athens, asking questions. The unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates, as recorded by Plato. For Socrates, justice was no longer about laws or statesmen, but about the inner life. He shifted the battlefield from the city to the soul. What is justice? What is courage? What is the good? He believed that before we build a just society, we must first understand what it means to be a just person. Socrates challenged the powerful, not with force, but with reason, irony, and moral clarity. And for that, Athens sentenced him to death. I am not angry with my accusers. I pity them. Plato, Apology. His death marked a turning point. A new kind of hero had emerged, not the warrior, not the orator, but the philosopher. Through Socrates, philosophy was born not as abstract theory, but as a way of life. He taught that truth is worth dying for, that the soul is our most precious possession, and that virtue begins with self-knowledge. This transition from politics to philosophy, from the city to the soul, would shape the course of Western thought for millennia. And it is where our modern understanding of liberal arts truly begins. Socrates taught that we must care for the soul. Plato went further, asking, what is the soul made of? In the Republic, Plato offers a revolutionary insight. He compares the human soul to a city with three distinct parts: reason, the wise ruler, spirit, the brave guardian, desire, the necessary producer. These parts often pull us in different directions. We may know what is right and still fail to do it. We may feel noble anger but act without wisdom. We may desire pleasure and forget what matters most. Plato saw this conflict not as a flaw but as a fact of human nature. The question was, how do we bring order to this inner chaos? His answer was not external discipline but internal harmony. Justice in the soul is when each part does its proper work, when reason rules, spirit supports, and desire obeys. Plato, Republic 4. This, Plato taught, is true justice, not a contract between people, but a condition within the self. When reason governs, when courage stands firm, when desire is restrained, we become whole. This inner harmony is the foundation of all virtue. Wisdom guides, courage acts, temperance restrains, justice unites them. Virtue, then, is not a list of rules, but a balanced soul in motion. It is not about what you do once, it is about who you are, consistently and deeply. And this harmony of the soul is what makes us free, not merely from tyranny, but from ourselves. This idea, that the soul has a structure and that virtue is its proper order, became the moral cornerstone of Western philosophy. It tells us before we seek justice in the world, we must seek justice within. History shows us a hard truth. Empires rise and fall. Wars rage. Leaders inspire and disappoint. Even the best systems can decay from within. Herodotus chronicled the victories that united Greece. Thucydides exposed the flaws that tore it apart. And Pericles, in all his wisdom, could not stop the storm that followed. So what remains when politics fails? Plato believed that the true source of justice is not found in laws or leaders, but in the soul. Until philosophers rule as kings, or those now called kings and leading men genuinely and adequately philosophize, there will be no end to the troubles of states and of humanity. Plato, Republic 5th. This was not a call for technocrats, but for moral vision, for rulers and citizens who seek harmony within before trying to impose order without. The lesson is simple, yet radical. We must govern ourselves before we can govern others. We must cultivate our own virtue before reforming the world. Philosophy matters not because it solves every political crisis, but because it strengthens the soul to endure them. In times of chaos, it offers clarity. In times of conflict, it offers conscience. And in times of doubt, it reminds us justice is not just about laws, it is about the kind of people we choose to become. From the poets and historians to the philosophers, the Greeks understood a free society begins with free souls, and a just world begins with those who seek justice within. This is why philosophy matters, not just for politics, but for life. In this section, we trace the arc of an awakening civilization, from the victories recorded by Herodotus, to the tragedies observed by Thucydides, to the noble hopes expressed by Pericles, and finally, to the inward turn of Socrates and Plato. History gave the Greeks stories of glory and ruin, politics gave them freedom and its limits, but philosophy gave them something deeper, a mirror for the soul. They saw that external order could not last unless it was rooted in inner virtue, and they realized that the strength of a society depends on the strength of its people, their wisdom, their courage, their self-restraint, their justice. In Plato's Republic, the city is a metaphor. The ideal polis is not just a place, it is a person, a soul in harmony. So the question becomes, if justice is harmony within, how do we cultivate it? What makes the soul truly just? That's the journey we'll take next. In the following section, we will explore the 4 cardinal virtues, the timeless framework of wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice, and see how they guide the formation of the self. And we will ask a deeper question still. Is virtue enough, or must it be completed by something more? Let us now turn to that answer.
You've now followed the journey, from war to wisdom, from the chaos of history to the calm of philosophy. You've seen how Herodotus shaped a shared memory of justice, how Thucydides revealed the dark mirror of human ambition, and how Pericles called Athens to a higher ethical standard. And then Socrates, a man who questioned everything, who believed that true justice begins not with laws, but with the soul. From Socrates to Plato, the moral center shifted inward. No longer just about the city, but about the harmony within. This is the moment when Western thought was reborn, not in conquest, but in conscience. Key takeaways. Section 3. A philosophy for the soul. Justice, as described by Herodotus, lives in the stories we tell and the values we defend. Thucydides exposed how power corrupts when virtue is lost, offering a warning, not a solution. Pericles, in his funeral oration, defined a civic morality that blends dignity, responsibility, and fairness. Socrates recentered philosophy on the inner life, the examined soul as the foundation of justice. Plato built on this, showing that virtue is harmony and that only a just soul can create a just society. From politics to philosophy, from the city to the self, the quest for justice is ultimately a quest for inner order.